Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I'm Nick, here with you as always, and thanks for joining us for episode number 59. So today we're going to be reviewing sort of the native spirit of Ireland, and that is the single pot still Irish whiskey. So what we have to review for you today is the Powers John's Lane Reserve. Now this is a 12-year, and just pull that bottle around for you there. It's got a bit of history behind it. So the John's Lane Distillery, which was around back in the late 18th century, started by a man named James Power. Just open up this little booklet for you here. If you do happen to purchase this, or if you have already, you'll notice that you get a little bit of an excerpt on Alfred Barnard's trip to Dublin and actually around Ireland to the various distilleries and other places, and sort of gives his account of the distillery, which is really interesting. And it's not just some marketing scam or something like that to raise the price. Not at all. It's actually really an interesting read. So, now, for those of you who don't know, single pot still Irish whiskey is a blend of malted barley and unmalted barley. Now, we've sort of seen a surge in the single pot still Irish whiskeys in really relatively recent past. So we have some out there that you may be familiar with, Redbreast and Green Spot, Yellow Spot. There's a couple other variations out there. But they're sort of starting to emerge in the market, and they're starting to realize, smartly enough, that folks like us want to taste different things. They want to taste what the native sort of spirit of Ireland was. Now, Middleton, who produces this, and owns the Powers brand now, the Irish Distillers Group, and they have done a phenomenal job of harkening back to the older bottles that were lying around from this distillery. And among all the tons of expressions that they make in their facility down in County Cork, it's really amazing that they're able to replicate. I mean, it's hard to say for me to replicate because I haven't tasted, the older whiskey, but to see that they have, harkened back to the older style of whiskey. And I think if you've tried this, or as we go through the review, you'll see that it really does set itself apart from other Irish whiskeys and any other whiskey scotch that is out there on the market today. And so basically, I've already poured myself a glass just to let it air out because it's a relatively new bottle. I've kept it sort of on the shelf for a little bit and neglected it, unfortunately, but I guess that's probably a good thing because I don't want to go rifling through the sort of better whiskeys that I have in there that are usually for special occasions. But I should just show you quick that also on here you get a nice little, get the damn thing open, nice little sketch rendering of John's Lane Distillery in Dublin way back in the day. So single pot still Irish whiskey was sort of the norm back then. And in terms of what's going into this, let's look at percentage-wise. We got 46% ABV, which is a beautiful thing, 92 proof. Now, most of the distillate that comes into making this expression is aged in previously held bourbon barrels, and also some Oloroso sherry casks they have Iberian wood or something like that I read, which is interesting. I don't think I've had anything else that was in Iberian wood, so I have nothing really to, compare that to. But anyway, so that's basically what we've got going on here. 12 years, so the minimum of any tiny drop of whiskey that's in here has to be 12 years old. And one thing we'll notice, and I can get into this a little bit more when we go through the taste of this, but is that it's a heavy distillate. Basically what I mean by that is when the master distiller goes through and makes the cuts from all the spirit that's running through the still, he basically has some choices. After about the first, once you get the low wines, after that you're pretty much good to start making these really important cuts. Now, you have the heads, which are sort of these really grassy, really, I want to say more medicinal, but they've got grassy, little, just raw, ripe, that sort of thing. And these are the more volatile alcohols, the things that are actually can be harmful. We're talking about alcohols like methanol. And once you get through there, that sort of trickles out of the still. And then once you start getting into the good alcohols that we want, the sort of steady stream that gets flowing, basically the distiller makes the cut of the heart. And then when it starts to trickle off again, you have more the solid or the heavier components that are left in the still, and those are the tails. So basically, when we talk about whether it's a narrow cut or a wide cut or whatever, if it's heavier or lighter, basically talking about how wide the cut is. So you can take in a little bit more from the head, a little bit more from the tail, or a little bit less on the tail, more on the head, and you can have a wide cut, that sort of thing. You can cut more towards the head, and that's what you get more of the grain alcohols, that sort of thing. And so basically what we have here is something that's really a wide cut, and it makes this so deep. And so let's just get into it. Now, looking at the color, it's hard to tell because it has been aged for 12 years in ex-bourbon and also a little bit of Oloroso sherry, that I don't think that there's any coloring in this, and I don't believe that it's been chill filtered. I don't know why they would go through the effort of making this amazing spirit and then do those two things to it. So anyway, you can tell, again, sort of, I talk about, you see sort of the legs on it, and you can tell that, well, you already got an age statement, so you don't really need to know how long the legs are, how slowly it trickles back down into the glass, because you already have an age statement. But and getting off the bat, right off the bat, is this really rich nuttiness, and it's not sort of just one type. It's just a bunch of different, really. It's got a real crisp earthiness to it. Definitely strong vanilla. But I'm talking like just raw vanilla, not sort of the flavor like a ice cream or something like that you may get a little bit more of the sweet note to it, but really just a rustic, earthy vanilla note to it. This is a whiskey where you can really get in on the nose and not feel overpowered by any strong sense of alcohol in there, and I think that's also because of the distillate being so heavy, is that it's sort of rounded out really nicely. Definitely some leathery notes to it, some tobacco, little tobacco leaf in there. Let's go in for the taste. Now, I have had a glass of this before, just so that I could get sort of my bearings on this. But I tell you, every time you take a sip of this, it's like another world. It is so far beyond any other Irish whiskey or any other whiskey that I've had before. Even amongst the pot stills, it's not. You can sort of see comparisons, but it's really just on another end of the spectrum. It's not really. You think of sort of, obviously, whiskey is a liquid, but with this, it's almost just like a lathery, almost syrupy to it, in the sense that you can actually, you feel like you can chew on it, which is really interesting and not something that I've had in many other whiskeys at all. And it's just phenomenal. The first thing that comes off is that mouthfeel and that texture, that sort of thing. It's just really sort of like ground together nuts or something like that texture to it. But it's interesting that that is sort of the first thing that you get off of the bat, because usually go in looking for the taste, but I think it's because it's so different than anything else I've ever had that that's the first thing that really stands out. And again, you could let that swirl around in your mouth forever, but the review would be 30 minutes long before you even got to that point of tasting it. And so basically what I'm getting is really rich, those ex-bourbon cask influence in there. And it's this nice vanilla, this creaminess, the nuttiness that I was talking about, but also a nice hint of sweetness, a little bit of butterscotch tone to it, a little marzipan, but no real strong fruitiness that I get in so many other Irish whiskeys, which is interesting because this is totally earthy. It's just rich, robust, creamy, lathery, and it's just absolutely brilliant. A little bit of graham cracker in there. Definitely some dark chocolate notes are coming through too. But just really nice. Damn, that's good. Wow. I don't think I've ever had anything like this before, and maybe never will have again, but it almost makes me want to go out and buy, a case of these, even though I don't have sort of the funds for that. But I would, if you see these out there, I would definitely snatch this up while you can. Even if it ends up not being your thing, your sort of go-to sort of, not luxury whiskey, but in the sense of like a special occasion or something like that. But you'll see that it's just so different that Irish whiskey just doesn't have to be sort of the Jamesons of the world, these fruity notes, these honey, which are all fine and good, but just know that there's a whole other world out there of Irish whiskey that is a complete, I don't think there's any other spirit in the world that goes through this whole spectrum of flavor profiles within a pretty limited. I mean, there's only so many distilleries out there right now. Now, of course, more are being built and more have started producing spirit, but it's not aged yet. Now, that'll be just even exponentially more interesting to see what people are coming out with, and hopefully they come out with some more single pot stills. That's definitely a nod to Tullamore. I would love to see a single pot still from Tullamore. But anyway, let's go in for one last pass here. Still a little bit of honey to it. Definitely a little graham cracker, but really robust, earthy nuttiness to it. Just wonderful. This will, in terms of mouthfeel and finish, it's creamy, lathery. Like I said, you can almost chew it. In the finish, it just lasts and lasts and lasts forever. I'm probably going to be tasting this when I wake up in the morning. So, if you haven't already got your keys to get ready to go outside and get in your car and go to the liquor store, then just absolutely the most complex, I would say, Irish whiskey that I've ever had. In terms of there's so much to be learned from this, in terms of being sort of a connoisseur of whiskey. But I mean, you don't even have to go to that point of where you're just sitting there analyzing it. That doesn't have to be what it's all about, but it's really interesting if you're into that sort of thing. It's a hobby for a lot of people to find sort of the nuance and taste all the flavor profiles that they can and find out what is, their whiskey, their go-to, what they recommend to everybody else. But let's get into price. I know a lot of people are interested in that. I got this for about $70 near where I am. Now, if you look at other scotches that are out there, some you may buy for 60, I would say 60 and $75. And to be honest, it's hit or miss sometimes. They're just more produced. There's a lot more expressions out there. Once somebody comes out with something, somebody else tries to, get in on that market of what they're advertising to, a new finish, a new small batch, basically trying to say that it's, exclusive, that sort of thing. It's finished. Finishes are big now, and finishes are wonderful, but if they're not done right, then it's like, words on a bottle and a hike of the price. But anyway, so you have these sort of people battling it out, and it seems like all the while these are going up, and sort of the water, I guess, if you will, from each of these splashing against each other is sort of trickling that sand down. And I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it just seems that quality these days is definitely something to be sought out. And so you'll be seeing some more. I believe there's 2 other expressions of powers that I can get my hands on relatively easily. In terms of price, I think this is the upper tier of those. There might be one other single pot still out there, I think, and then the other one I think is a blend from Powers, but it'll be interesting. So, well, I'm going to go finish this, but if you're wondering about the score, I haven't really done too many other reviews to compare them to, except for the green spot and yellow spot. And basically, if I were going to put 3 glasses out and taste all 3 of those, I would have to say this would beat out the yellow spot, even though I do like yellow spot for its uniqueness too. I've never tasted anything else like that. But again, it's a single pot still Irish whiskey, and they're not around a lot, so people aren't exposed to it a lot. So if you do get a chance to taste this at a bar or get yourself a bottle if you can, please do, and please comment. I would love to know what other people think. And sort of when you're excited about something, you want to hear what other people have to say as well and get on board with you. So I'm going to go finish this. If you're having a drink, cheers to you. And if you do drink responsibly, and we'll see you next time.